Richard Rodgers with a walk-off touchdown. Total disbelief at Ford Field.
He may go all the way to the 20 down the right side, and it's Randall Cobb to the 5, to the end zone, to the touchdown. Oh my goodness.
Welcome, everyone, to the Green and Golden Boys Packers podcast, the podcast for Packer fans who clearly have no idea what they're talking about. I am your host, Charles, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Marcus. Marcus, how you doing?
Speak for yourself, Charles.
Well, maybe I should speak for myself. I am, of course, referring to the fact that today was the deadline. We're recording just after the 3 o'clock Central Standard Time deadline. That the NFL teams had to make their final 53-man, their initial 53-man roster. Cuts have been made, and there are a few guys on this list that got cut today that I'm surprised. Go back 1 episode, 2 episodes, and there's 2 guys in particular that I was pretty high on, and maybe that means I just got too involved with them emotionally during the preseason, and maybe it means I just don't know what I'm talking about. I am, of course, talking about Juwann Winfree and Tyler Goodson, wide receiver and running back. But I clearly have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm glad there's professionals in the room to make these decisions.
Well, so I was thinking about this today and yesterday, and it's like we should be clear. Like what we think and what we want are 2 different things, right? So from an emotional perspective, I really wanted Tyler Goodson to make the team. He kind of an underdog story. He's a small guy. Making it in the NFL is difficult as it is. Especially when you consider his size. He was dynamic during the preseason. He made a lot of plays, and I think we just kind of hoped that he would make he would squeak onto the roster. But unfortunately, he will not. I've been listening to and reading a lot of articles the last couple of days, and I would say 80% of the people that I've read and listened to predicted that Patrick Taylor was going to be RB3, mainly because of his play on special teams. Tyler Goodson didn't have a great special teams outing, and we know how the Packers are kind of in desperate need of guys who can be multifaceted, contribute to the offense or defense and also on special teams. So this makes sense when you look at it objectively, but again, a guy that we were rooting for, and it's tough to see him get cut. But hopefully we can sneak him out of the practice squad, and maybe the next year or 2 he can join this running backs room during the regular season.
Yeah, and the big negative on him as well, on top of special teams, which I think is the most important, because that would be where he would have gotten his most time. But also, if he did get in the backfield, his run blocking, rush blocking ability, right, picking up the blitz, apparently was not as good as where it needs to be, and that was a little bit more evident apparently during the Chiefs game. I did not see that. I didn't catch that, but that was the big kind of scouting report on him on that last game is those are some things. And if you think about our quarterback, right, do you want someone you don't feel 100% confident or as close to 100% confident as possible protecting Rodgers' blind side? So yeah, I think we both were emotionally into him for some cool explosive runs we saw. Hopefully he sneaks into the practice squad. How about the other guy that I was surprised by? Are you as surprised by I am? And do you think Aaron Rodgers was surprised that Juwann Winfree was also released today?
First of all, I was not surprised by this. People kept saying they're going to keep Juwann Winfree, and I think a lot of that probably stems from the fact that he's been on the team a couple of years, on the practice squad, and Aaron Rodgers has developed kind of a relationship and some trust with him. But the way that Samori Toure played in the preseason, and then the fact that he's a rookie draft pick this year, I just kept thinking, like, how can they justify cutting him? Right. Like Juwann Winfree's taken a couple of years and he's kind of getting to that point, but I would say that Samori Toure, based on what we've seen this preseason, has a lot more upside. He may not be better than Juwann Winfree this year, but next year, the year after that, like, I think he's got the potential to be a contributing receiver on this team. And I feel like Juwann Winfree, just on his best day, is just kind of wide receiver 7. Just a depth piece. Maybe he gets 1 target, 2 targets a game at most. So didn't surprise me. But again, Juwann Winfrey's a guy that we were rooting for. You know, you want to keep everybody. You obviously can't. But yeah, I just couldn't see them cutting, Samori Toure, because I think he would more likely be picked up by another team than Juwann Winfrey would.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I think the only reason why Winfrey got so much steam there late is because Aaron Rodgers, I feel like, went out of his way to comment on how well he's doing. And the last time we saw that happen was with your guy Kumerow, 3 years ago now? And that later came out during this whole schism between the front office and Rodgers, not taking his opinion, into account. I cannot imagine that this was a surprise to Rodgers today and that they brought it up, knowing, their history. But I think that's probably why there was some steam there, is because Rodgers went out of his way to compliment the guy, and it seemed like a sign that, he was one of the receivers that Rodgers wanted to keep. Do you agree with me? Do you think there's any chance in hell that the front office, without consulting Rodgers, decided to cut yet another guy that he went out of his way to compliment?
No way in hell. There's no way they would have done that without first bringing it up to Rodgers. They maybe didn't ask for his input. I'm sure he gave it regardless. But they given what we've seen the last couple of years, they had to have brought this to his attention. Just saying, look, we can't keep JW. We want to keep Toure. And just laid it out for him.
Yeah, but without getting into the Aaron Rodgers saga of the last 3 years, don't you think you and I had the exact same, talk track 3 years ago when they cut Kumerow, right? Do you think there's any chance in hell that they cut Kumerow without talking to Aaron Rodgers? I feel like we both would have been like, no way, they definitely talked to him. I understand it'd be even dumber now that if they didn't do that, but I just feel like we've been surprised before, and I just would hate to see this turn into something that hopefully it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Jake Kumerow release was kind of the catalyst for all this stuff, and it was kind of like the first time we started hearing about Rodgers' grievances with the front office. But you're probably right. I think but I can't imagine they didn't bring this up to him and just say, hey, here's what we're gonna do. Wanted to let you know before we did it. And then maybe they asked for his input. But I'm sure they. Go ahead.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think maybe I'm just trying to be a true podcaster and create controversy where it's not. But are there any other surprises today that you saw from a roster perspective?
Yeah, I think rookie. I think defensive tackle Jack Heflin. He was one that I was a little bit surprised by. I mean, if you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, he was one of our top defensive linemen graded throughout the preseason, so it was a little surprising there. He is an undrafted free agent, but I just don't understand that, I guess. I mean, they must think that they've got Chris Slayton who's showing some upside, so he may be one that they're just thinking okay, well, he's an undrafted free agent. We can probably just squeak him out of the practice squad. He'll be safe. But that was a surprise. The bigger surprise, though, from a line perspective, is offensive lineman Caleb Jones. The guy's basically 7 feet tall and 300 some pounds, and had a really good preseason too. Graded really well according to Pro Football Focus. So. This is a guy that I can't imagine isn't going to get snatched up by another team. I don't see him clearing waivers. I just, no. So that was a surprise because I felt like he was the biggest risk.
Positionally, who doesn't need offensive linemen, right? Everyone probably has their Tyler Goodson. Everyone probably has their Winfrey, but offensive tackles, offensive line is important. Right, and that's a very key. It's quarterback, and there's not too many David Bakhtiaris out there. You know what I mean? So, not saying that he is, but just the position alone, I think, makes him very susceptible to being claimed. And I think if I was a betting man, I'd put money on him not being around here in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We'll see what happens, but hopefully we can sneak him out of the practice squad. I don't really see that happening, but
Does it give
let's
you
hope for
more
the best.
confidence in what we have? Does it give you that much more confidence in Jenkins and Bakhtiari being back? Even as soon as week 1 or 2, right? Like if they were going to be gone 3 or 4, or even later, I think you keep all the offensive linemen that you have. But does this give you more confidence in A, their injuries, and then B, the other folks on the roster?
Yeah, I think it has to. I think releasing a guy like this kind of shows that we have depth at the position, or at least depth across the line. So I think that gives me a little bit of confidence. Not necessarily that we're going to get Bakhtiari or Elton Jenkins back right away, but more so
Right.
that they're comfortable with the group they have.
Yeah, and I think it gives me more confidence that those guys will come back in those first four games and not being designated. Because I think now, if I understand the rules correctly, if they were put on IR now, they'd be out for the season. But as long as the offense, Jenkins and Bakhtiari, that is, as long as they are on that active roster for week 1, they could theoretically be put back on that PUP list and miss 4 weeks. But I guess this just gives the fact that they're not keeping on to every offensive lineman they have makes me feel like even if it's not in week 1 or 2, they're coming back there in those first couple weeks of the season. So that could be wrong, as I started the episode. I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's just kind of how I read into it.
Yeah, and I can't remember if we talked about this already. Stop me if we did, but we found out too just recently that they're activating Mason Crosby from the PUP list, and we released the other kicker.
Yep.
So I wasn't cheering for the other kicker. I love Mason Crosby as much as anyone. But I was kind of like, okay, well, if he starts the season on the PUP and misses the first 4 weeks, we've got a 4-week audition by this other kicker. That's going to be interesting, just because with his last couple of years being a little bit shaky, a little inconsistent, he's getting up there. He's almost 40 years old himself, so this is a position that's going to be of need over the next year or two, if not already. So I kind of thought this was going to turn into something a little bit more interesting, but not to be. They cut the other guy, and Mason Crosby will be the Packers kicker starting day 1.
Well, and remember kind of the last dance, feeling that we had last year after we lost that 49ers game, and everyone kind of said, okay, is Aaron Rodgers coming back? What's happening? Who are we going to cut? Who are we going to get rid of? We're in cap hell, yada, yada, yada. Mason Crosby was on the list for most people of getting rid of because he takes more salary than, a rookie or an unknown kicker does. So this, that doesn't change necessarily next year or the year after. So, we might, I think to your point, there's not as much drama right now in the first 4 weeks. But I think to your point, he's getting up there, and this might be the last year that we see Mason, and hopefully it ends with a very good year, right? The special teams we don't need to talk about today in too much detail, but it would be good to have him, end his last year or two on a higher note.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'd like to get him back to his prime, but I think those days are probably behind him. I think for him, it's just going to be a matter of being as consistent as possible. I mean, he's probably not going to make a 60-yarder anytime soon, but if he can just hit everything kind of 55 and under and, be clutch in the 1 or 2 moments where we need him to be, that would be great. And I'd also like to see him kick a few more balls through the back of the end zone so that we don't give other teams the opportunity to return those, because that is obviously every time he kicks it to like the 1 yard line and that guy's back there to receive it. I'm just like, okay, here comes a 40-yard return. So yeah. Every time I hold my breath, but
or even get like 3 more yards to make the returner think about it,
right.
That much longer. But yeah, that little chip shot almost, which for a while I thought was intentional and I thought was genius, right? Like, hey, let's just get him down on the 19, right? Let's earn ourselves some 6 yards. But that right there might be the reason over field goals why we might end up moving on from him if we can't get him out and we can't figure out how to cover somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm sure we'll talk about special teams ad nauseum this season.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, or at least in a positive light. That would be ideal. But it all remains to be seen. We're still, over a week away from opening day.